Hi, everyone. I'm Leslyn Keith. I'm the president of the board of the Lipedema Project and director of research. And I get together with you every first and third Thursday of the month to talk about research updates. What is some of the latest research and papers being written about lipedema? And I like to share them with you. Sometimes people make suggestions, and that's what the paper I'm going to talk to you about today. Suggested by several people, including Catherine Seo at the Lipedema Project and Lipedema Simplified. So I think you'll find it really interesting. Just one small announcement before I get started talking about the paper. I want to let you know about a coaching special interest group. We call them CSIGs, coming up just in time for the holidays. So it's called Thriving Through the Holidays, not just to make it through, but to actually thrive during the holidays. Check this out. We'll have a link for you so you can get more information about it. It's starting on Monday. So check this out, and I think you would enjoy being a part of that group. And so this paper that I'm going to talk about today is called, Does Lipedema Mimic Pregnancy? Thought it was a super interesting topic, and so did several of the people, so they suggested it to me. Be sure and send me papers if you'd like me to review it during these research update flash Facebook Lives. So I'd be happy to do it. This one was really interesting. It was just published this year, 2022. It's in Wounds International. It's by Dr. Samantha Connolly. So I think you'll find it really interesting. Samantha Connolly is an assistant professor of psychology at Harvard Medical School, and she's also a clinical psychologist through the VA Boston healthcare system. So what was the aim of this paper? It was kind of a review paper, wasn't an actual study, but she was looking at the literature and the information that was out there. And she wanted to look at the lower body fat storage and the strong resistance to burning this fat that happens during pregnancy, and how is this similar to women with lipedema? And she asks, is this hormonal dysregulation that women with lipedema experience, is it similar to what happens naturally during pregnancy? And I should say, if you're seeing that looks like I'm in my bedroom here, it is because I'm in a hotel room. I'm at the National Lymphedema Network conference that's happening right now in Cleveland, Ohio. So getting together with lots of lymphedema therapists and lymphologists from around the country and the world, all getting together in Cleveland. So it's been a really good conference. It actually is just now starting, and I'm sure I'll report back to you with more information about it. So let's talk about this paper, Does Lipedema Mimic Pregnancy? And so what she talks about first is fat storage and pregnancy. And she talks about the lower body fat storage in girls and women, and how a resistance to fats losing fat in the lower body seen during pregnancy is very similar and a key characteristic to what happens in lipedema. So girls and women just have naturally, we have more fat storage, subcutaneous fat and fat to the lower body, just naturally, than do boys and men. And it really, this difference between male and female really is accentuated at puberty. A typical pattern of fat storage during the course of a pregnancy, I thought this was really interesting, that during the early stages of pregnancy through about halfway through, we're really in fat storage mode. And in the later stages of pregnancy and during, right after birth is when we really start fat burning. And she talked about the increased levels of estrogen that happen during pregnancy, during the early stages of pregnancy, and actually estrogen, progesterone, and insulin. And all three of these hormones really act to help us store fat. So we're not able to burn fat during those times. And another group of hormones that are of interest to both pregnancy and lipedema are what they're called catecholamines. Adrenaline is a catecholamine. And so this is a hormone that's released in response to stress, and really causes the body to burn fat because you need the energy. So an interesting fact that she brings up is that during pregnancy, fat cells on a woman's hips, buttocks, and thighs are virtually unresponsive to that this fat burning hormone. So typically, when you have adrenaline, for instance, released, it's going to cause you to burn fat. But those particular areas of the woman's body, to the hips, buttocks, and thighs, they will be unresponsive. It will retain that fat, even though there's a hormone circulating that says burn fat. And this is very natural during pregnancy. Interestingly, that's what happens to a woman with lipedema all the time. And so she says that this is actually a natural response, because if you were in a famine situation, you want to still bring the pregnancy to term. And so you can do that if you retain fat, and it would help you survive a famine, you and the fetus. So I thought that was interesting. And then she also talks about how past research has found enlarged fat cells in the thighs and abdomen in women with lipedema compared to healthy controls. So they have larger fat cells in the thigh and the abdomen. And this is also what is seen in pregnant versus non-pregnant women. The pregnant women have larger fat cells. And so Dr. Connolly suggests, well, we should be comparing the fat cells in lipedema women and women who are pregnant. That would be a very interesting thing to look at. Then she talks about another hormone called prolactin. And prolactin it's a hormone that increases during pregnancy. And the primary purpose of it is to cause milk production and also to suppress impregnation immediately after birth. So it also promotes fat storage, and it causes insulin sensitivity. So there's a condition called hyperprolactinemia, and that means too much prolactin in the blood, and it can be caused by extreme levels of stress. And we talk about how sometimes a trigger for the onset or an exacerbation of lipedema could be stress. And so this hyperprolactinemia outside of pregnancy, this can just show up in response to stress. And it is something that is present in 10% of women worldwide. So, and it can lead to menstrual problems, acne, and weight gain. So Dr. Connolly suggests that this would be also something interesting to look at. Do women with lipedema have high levels of prolactin in general? She talked about two women that she had experience with, that this was an issue. One had 10 times the normal level of prolactin in her blood. And it was a response to a stress situation, that she had a benign pituitary tumor, and she had this elevated levels of prolactin, and then developed lipedema. And another talked about that she had had lipedema since puberty, but the only time she didn't have lipedema was when she was breastfeeding. So then all of a sudden the legs would slim down because she was burning the fat on her legs. So very interesting. And Dr. Connolly suggests it would be really good if we started looking at that. Then she talks about another hormone called relaxin. And this is also an important hormone during pregnancy, because this is the thing that allows your muscles and ligaments and tendons to relax, so that it allows you to accommodate the growing fetus and also to deliver a child. So, and she, the way that the relaxin works is that it degrades the connective tissue that allows this stuff to relax. And so since there is a high level or a high association with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder in which you have hypermobility or you're super flexible. Sometimes even if you don't have EDS, it's still, you could have mobility or a lot of flexibility associated with your lipedema. And so Dr. Connolly wonders, is there a high level of relaxin that present in women with lipedema? She's guessing that probably yes. So it would be something interesting to research. She talks a lot about other female hormones such as estrogen and progesterone and what those things do during pregnancy and what they might be doing during lipedema. One thing I think that is confusing about estrogen in particular is that estrogen, depending on other conditions and other factors, it can be inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And so there's lots of questions on, should I do hormone replacement therapy? Should I not do that? Why is this changing when I go through perimenopause and menopause and I have less estrogen? Why does it seem lipedema accelerate during puberty and pregnancy when I have more estrogen? And it all depends on the other condition, other variables there on how that estrogen is going to act on you. So I think we don't have a clear idea yet of what to expect. But one thing that they have found in research in other conditions is that higher levels of estrogen are associated with a higher pain perception. And so that is really interesting in respect to lipedema, because women with lipedema, a lot of them have heightened pain sensitivity, hypersensitivity. So also another interesting thing. She talked about several in her conclusions. I thought this was really interesting. She talked about how most research has been performed by men on men or males. And so we need more research that's done on women. We need to, in order to really figure out this intricate interplay between different hormones and how it's impacting lipedema, how it may compare or mimic pregnancy. This, you really need to not only study women, but it needs to be perhaps lipedema and pregnant women, specifically comparing those two populations, I think would really help us, be very interesting. She said specifically she'd like to see the connections between mental health, stress, and elevated prolactin levels. She said that in this paper, she said she believes that she's the first person to really look at that hormone of prolactin and examine that this may be involved in lipedema. I thought that was interesting. I think this is super important paper for women with lipedema. It gives us a new avenue to look at. I think this paper really brought together information that is already out there in new and interesting ways. I think that it would be really cool to look at estrogen levels that steadily increase during pregnancy. How is this similar or dissimilar to estrogen levels that we find in women with lipedema? Looking at progesterone, it's also elevated throughout pregnancy. And how are progesterone levels during pregnancy similar to progesterone levels with lipedema? Sometimes what we see in someone who is considered to be estrogen dominant, it's more that the progesterone is low. And so they have normal levels of estrogen, but it's high compared to their levels of progesterone because it's so low. But is that standard for lipedema, or can you also have those elevated levels of progesterone and be experiencing lipedema? One thing that she didn't talk about was lipoprotein lipase, which I think would also be interesting to look at, because this is an enzyme that helps break up triglycerides, and are LPL levels elevated in pregnancy? Maybe in the latter stages of pregnancy, when we're getting into the fat burning, maybe they're elevated. And what is the role of this enzyme, LPL? What's that role in lipedema? So all these comparisons with pregnancy, I think, will be interesting, because we have had this discussion of perhaps that women with lipedema evolved to be the women that could survive a famine, but now it is gone a little bit haywire in our modern culture and um, our food culture and our health culture, and it's gotten off kilter, where it used to be very adaptive and very functional, and is not so functional now. And their women with lipedema quite often can develop these other comorbidities that are not healthy and can be quite painful. So this would be great to learn more about what Dr. Connolly was discussing. I see a couple things that are put into the chat. And Marilee says, hi from Chehalis, Washington, cute little town that I've driven through before. And then we also have Kate. I hear so many people that have had toxemia and preeclampsia that have lipedema. My mother had it with me, and I had it with my first child. And there is a lot with pregnancy, seems to be the trigger for a lot of women for lipedema. So is there not only a similar hormonal profile going on, but is there something that can be triggering that toxemia and preeclampsia, and also is a trigger for lipedema? Kate, you are so right. That would be something really interesting to learn about. I completely agree. And Juanetta says that there's a widespread availability of high carb foods. So that's exactly what I'm talking about, Juanetta, is that food culture. And is it making something that previously was adaptive, having that lipedema body that would be resistant to burning fat, that may be functional at certain time periods, is no longer functional and has gone haywire because of our food culture and that high availability of high carb foods, just as you say. And then Juanetta also says, hormonal aspects and various forms of birth control, does it lead to early onset? Yes, I do think that this would be really good to study, Juanetta, because we're looking at those impacts of hormones on a woman. And when they are altered artificially, or are altered because of our health status, what kind of impact does it have on your lipedema? It'd be super interesting to look at that as well. You are so right. That's there's so many, the more we learn, there's more we need to study, right? These are all excellent questions. Thank you all so much for being here with me today. I so enjoy reading these papers and analyzing them and then discussing them with you. I really would enjoy it if you sent me papers that you would like me to take a look at. Happy to do that. I have a little bit of a backlog, so I may not get to what you asked me for right away, but I will get to them. And Kate, I just see that Kate just put, have to also say my first, I was eating high carb. I swelled. The second was super low carb and didn't swell as much. Yeah. So I'm thinking you say your first pregnancy versus your second pregnancy, and depending what you ate. Yeah. I think you put yourself in a better place by reducing that. You see here posted is my email, leslyn@lipedemaproject.org. Feel free to email me with any of your suggestions, or if you have questions. If you have difficulty getting a hold of the article, we have it posted here for you, the link to the article. But if you have any difficulty with accessing it, please don't hesitate to contact me. Once again, wonderful being here with you, and I look forward to our next visit on the first